In this episode, we're crossing over into a completely different kind of supplement brand from the last two we looked at. And I mean the total opposite in almost every way. The last two brands, Array and Primal Queen, they won on lifestyle, on identity, on belief. Soft, cultural, aspirational stuff. Today's brand wins on none of that. It wins on a hard, specific, slightly uncomfortable problem and a direct response engine built to convert that problem into a subscription. The brand is Mars Men, and the numbers are almost hard to believe. Bootstrapped, no outside money, and they hit a $100 million revenue run rate in under 18 months, profitably, serving over 400,000 customers. Then, one of the biggest consumer investment firms in the world led a $27.5 million round. So what's the problem they're solving? Low testosterone, low energy, low drive, men not feeling like themselves. It's a problem most brands tiptoe around because it's a little awkward and a little masculine and not exactly dinner party conversation. Mars Men ran straight at it, and that willingness to run at an uncomfortable, high-intent problem is a huge part of why they won. Now, my whole thesis on this show is that people don't buy supplements the way they buy other products. And Mars Men is a perfect example of a different flavor of that truth. Because when a man is dealing with this specific problem, his buying psychology is nothing like a woman casually adding a wellness gummy to her routine. It's more driven. And if you understand that, you understand why this brand scaled the way it did. Okay, just a quick note. This is part 4 of a series called The Next Wave, where we break down the supplement brands scaling right now and what they're doing differently. Part 1 was the shift from format to positioning. Part 2 was array and sharp positioning. Part 3 was Primal Queen and riding a belief. Today, it's Mars Men and the power of owning a high-intent problem with a direct response machine behind it. You don't need the earlier ones to follow this, but they connect. Okay, now let's get to it. Welcome to Health Business Mastery, the Creative Thirst podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Hewitt. So let me start with the thing that makes this brand so different from the lifestyle brands, which is the nature of the problem itself. There are two kinds of problems in the supplement world, roughly speaking, that is. There are low-intent problems and high-intent problems. A low-intent problem is something like, I'd like a bit more energy, or I should probably take something for general wellness. It's real, but it's soft. There's no urgency behind it. The person could buy today or next month or never, and their life doesn't really change either way. Most of the wellness category lives in low-intent problems, and that's why so much of it competes on branding and vibe and lifestyle. When the problem is soft, you have to sell the feeling around it. A high-intent problem is different. A high-intent problem is something the person feels acutely, thinks about often, and genuinely wants gone. Low testosterone, as Mars Men frames it, is a high-intent problem. A man who feels tired all the time, whose drive is gone, who doesn't feel like a man anymore, that man isn't casually browsing wellness. He's bothered. He's been bothered for a while. He's probably typed some version of his symptoms into a search bar late at night. The desire is already there, fully formed and intense in a way it simply isn't for a low-intent problem. And this maps directly onto the first of the 4 buying forces, which is desire. As I always say, you don't create desire, you intensify what's already there. With a high-intent problem, the desire is already turned up loud before the buyer ever meets you. You're not coaxing a soft want into existence. You're meeting an intense, existing want and pointing it at your product. That's a fundamentally easier and more scalable sale. And it's the first reason Mars Men could grow as fast as it did. They picked a problem where the desire was already screaming. So the first lesson from Mars Men is a strategic one that comes way before any marketing. The problem you choose to build around determines how hard your marketing has to work. Pick a soft, low-intent problem, and you'll spend the rest of your life manufacturing urgency that isn't there. Pick a sharp, high-intent problem, and the urgency is already in the buyer. Mars Men chose their problem well. A lot of struggling brands are struggling because they chose a problem that nobody feels urgently, and no amount of clever marketing fully fixes that. But low T is a landmine. So let's talk about why most brands won't touch a problem like this, because that avoidance is exactly what created the opening. Low testosterone, male vitality, drive, all of it sits in a zone that a lot of founders and marketers find a little uncomfortable. It's masculine in a way that feels out of step with a lot of modern wellness branding. It brushes up against topics people don't love talking about openly, and it lives in a scientifically contentious space where the medical establishment is skeptical of over-the-counter testosterone support, which makes cautious brands nervous. It also sits in a highly looked-at area of supplements, dare I say dirty, and most traffic channels have major problems with it. So most brands either avoid the category entirely or they water it down into something vague and safe about general men's wellness. Mars Men did the opposite. They named the problem plainly and built the whole brand around it. And that plainness is a form of trust, which is another of the four forces. When you say the thing your buyer is actually feeling, in the words he'd use himself without dancing around it, he feels understood. He thinks, finally, a brand that just says it. That directness builds a bond fast because most of the noise in his life has been polite avoidance. And here's a brand treating him like an adult with a real problem. The willingness to be direct about an uncomfortable problem is a genuine competitive advantage because it's an advantage most competitors are too skittish to copy. The squeamishness of the rest of the market is your opening. And this is a repeatable idea. Ask yourself what real problem in your category everyone is too polite, too cautious, or too brand conscious to name plainly. Because that unclaimed, slightly uncomfortable problem might be the sharpest position available to you, precisely because nobody else will plant a flag on it. Okay, so they picked a high-intent problem, and they were brave enough to name it. Now let's get into the engine, because this is where Mars Men really separates from the lifestyle brands. The direct response machine and the economics underneath it. The co-founder who runs marketing has said the marketing engine they built is unlike any brand he's seen. That's a bold claim, but the growth backs up that something real is happening there. And when you look at how the brand operates, the model is clear. It's subscription-forward direct response. They're not primarily building a lifestyle brand you follow for the vibe. They're running sharp, problem-focused, direct response that takes a man with an urgent problem and converts him into a subscriber as efficiently as possible. This is a different game from what Array A or Primal Queen are playing, and the economics are the reason it works at scale. Let me walk through it, because this is the part that matters most for your business. A high-intent problem like this one comes with a natural repeat purchase hook built right in. Think about it. If a man feels the product is helping him get his energy and drive back, the last thing he's going to do is stop taking it. Stopping means risking a slide back into feeling terrible. So the retention is baked into the nature of the problem. He keeps buying not because of a clever loyalty program, but because the problem is ongoing and the fear of it returning is real. That's the strongest kind of repeat purchase there is, the kind driven by the problem itself rather than by marketing. And when your retention is strong because the problem is chronic and the stakes feel high, your whole economic model transforms. Your lifetime value goes way up because the average customer stays for many months instead of buying once. And when your lifetime value is high, you can afford to spend more to acquire each customer and still come out ahead. That's the entire secret to scaling paid acquisition profitably. It's not a magic ad. It's that a high lifetime value gives you room to outbid competitors on traffic and still make money. Marsmen reaching 100 million run rate profitably, while bootstrapped tells you their lifetime value to cost to acquire math is working beautifully. And it's working beautifully in large part because they chose a problem with a natural repeat purchase hook. So there's a chain here I want you to see clearly. A high intent problem creates intense existing desire, which makes acquisition efficient. And a chronic high stakes problem creates natural retention, which drives up lifetime value. Efficient acquisition plus high lifetime value is the entire formula for scaling a direct response supplement brand profitably. Marsmen didn't get there by accident. They got there because the problem they chose feeds both halves of that equation. The problem does a lot of the economic work before the marketing even starts. Now let's talk about the product itself, because they made some smart choices there too that support the direct response model. Marsmen uses a blend that combines old world herbs with more conventional familiar ingredients like zinc and boron. And there's something clever in that combination from a buying psychology standpoint. The ancient herbs carry a story, a sense of traditional time-tested potency which feeds hope and belief. The familiar minerals feel grounded and legitimate to the more skeptical functional part of the buyer's mind. So the formula speaks to both minds at once. The emotional mind that wants to believe in something powerful and natural, and the functional mind that wants ingredients it recognizes as real. They also, to their credit, use a fully disclosed label rather than hiding everything inside a proprietary blend. In a category that's full of blends that conceal the actual doses, being transparent about what's in the product and at what dose is a real trust signal. It says we're not hiding anything. Look for yourself. For a skeptical buyer in a category with a lot of snake oil, that openness is a meaningful differentiator. And it supports the direct response argument because you can point to real disclosed ingredients as proof while you're making the case. So the product supports the funnel. The story-driven herbs give the marketing something evocative to talk about. The familiar minerals give the skeptic something solid to hold on to. And the transparent label gives the whole thing credibility. It all serves the machine. Now, I want to be straight with you about the risk here, the same way I was with Primal Queen, because this model has a real vulnerability. The category Marsmen plays in is scientifically contentious. The honest state of the evidence is that over-the-counter testosterone support supplements have mixed and often inconclusive research behind them. Reviews of the category have found that the vast majority of testosterone booster products make claims that most of them can't fully support with solid data. That doesn't mean the ingredients do nothing, but it does mean the brand is making strong promises in a space where the proof is shakier than the marketing implies. When you build a fast, aggressive, direct response machine on top of a scientifically contentious promise, you take on risk. Regulators pay attention to testosterone claims. Journalists and science writers scrutinize brands like this, and Marsmen already has critics pointing out the gap between the confident marketing and the actual evidence. There's also a subtler retention risk. If a meaningful chunk of buyers don't actually feel a difference, the natural repeat purchase hook I described weakens because the retention depends on the man believing it's working. High-intent problems cut both ways. The desire is strong, but the disappointment is strong too if the product doesn't deliver on an urgent need. So the direct response high-intent problem model is powerful, but it lives or dies on the product actually doing enough for enough people to keep the retention engine turning. Aggressive marketing on a weak product in a high-intent category is a short-term spike, followed by a wall of refunds and bad word of mouth. Marsmen's scale suggests the product is landing for enough of their customers to sustain the model, at least so far, but this is the tightrope every brand in this lane walks. Go in clear-eyed about that. All right, let's make this practical for your brand, because even if you're nowhere near the men's vitality space, the lessons here transfer directly. The first thing to examine is the intent level of the problem you're built around. Be honest about whether your buyer feels an urgent, acute problem or a soft, someday want. If it's soft, you have two choices. You can either find the sharper, higher intent version of the problem inside your category and reposition around that, or you can accept that you'll have to do more of the emotional and lifestyle work that the low-intent brands do. But at minimum, know which game you're playing, because trying to run lean direct response on a low-intent problem is a common and expensive mistake. The second thing is to look hard for the repeat purchase hook inside your problem. The brands that scale profitably almost always have a problem where stopping the product feels risky to the customer. If your product solves something once and the buyer has no reason to continue, your lifetime value will be low and your economics will always be tight. So ask, is my problem chronic? Does the benefit reverse if they stop? Is there a real reason felt by the customer to stay subscribed? If the answer is weak, that's a strategic problem worth solving at the product and positioning level, not something you can paper over with a discount on the second order. And the third thing is to find the problem in your category that everyone else is too polite or too cautious to name plainly. That's often where the sharpest, least crowded position is hiding. The rest of the market's squeamishness is your opportunity. If you can be the brand that says the real thing directly, in the words your buyer actually uses, you build trust fast and you claim a position nobody else was willing to take. So let me bring this back to the bigger picture of this whole series. Array 1 on sharp positioning, Primal Queen, 1 on writing a belief, Marsmen 1 on owning a high-intent problem with a direct response engine and repeat purchase economics behind it, 3 completely different playbooks. And that's the real lesson of the next wave. There isn't one way to win. There are several distinct plays, and the smartest thing you can do is figure out which one actually fits your brand, your buyer, and your problem, instead of blindly copying whichever brand is going viral this month. Marsmen also proves something that runs against a lot of current wellness fashion. You don't have to be soft and lifestyle driven to win. Sometimes the biggest opportunity is the hard, direct, slightly uncomfortable problem that everyone else is avoiding, sold with real economic discipline underneath it. In a category obsessed with vibes, sharp problem solution direct response is quietly one of the most powerful and scalable models there is, as long as your product can carry the promise. So here's what I want you to do after this one. Write down the core problem your brand solves and rate it honestly on 2 things. How urgently does your buyer feel it? And how badly would they miss the result if they stopped? Those 2 numbers, intent and retention, tell you almost everything about how scalable your economics can be. And if both are weak, that's your real work, long before you touch another ad. Next episode, we move into the third bucket of the next wave, the premium targeted brands, and we're going to look at ritual and seed and the idea of using education and radical transparency as a moat. It's a different kind of trust play from anything we've covered so far. And there's a real lesson in it about when education helps you and when it quietly trains your customer to go buy a cheaper version somewhere else. I'll see you there. And if this episode has you realizing your brand is built on a low intent problem with a weak repeat purchase hook, that's one of the most important things you could possibly know about your business. And it's fixable with the right positioning work. Look for the next part in this series next week. Until then, keep marketing.